The Sigmar's Heirs Empire Overhaul not only totally reworks a lot of the systems in the campaign, it also introduces a number of new units to the faction's roster. We've got various new lords and heroes alongside some of the most powerful infantry and war machines the faction has ever seen. Let's take a look at it all and get into the roster. This video is also sponsored by Instant Gaming, but more on that later. So starting with the lords, first up we have Kurt Helborg. He's a fairly standard battling lord with very strong stats across the board. Both attack and defense are extremely high alongside a good chunk of both armor and armor piercing damage. The bottom line is a very tough lord to take down in combat that will throw out a massive amount of damage whilst he's there. This works great versus single targets like overlords and heroes or groups of infantry, so as long as he's battling, you're getting great value. For his mounts, he has Krieglust. This is pretty much a standard horse mount giving him more speed and charge bonus, but changing little else. You can still use him the same, but maybe use that speed to flank around to take out lords behind the front lines for safer value with that larger size. We also have Artus von Pretzen. He's extremely similar to basic generals of the Empire, just with 3 more attack and no other real changes. A strong front lines fighter without much armor piercing, so works best versus weaker targets. For his mounts, he has the Barded Warhorse. Same story as usual, more speed and charge, but the same aside from that. Use the high speed to target the back lines and keep him out of the front lines with the larger hitbox. Imperial Pegasus is even faster and can fly, but the same advice as before applies, alongside being even more cautious of ranged focus. Stjana drops a little speed and melee stats to gain armor piercing weapon strength. He's a little riskier to use with the reduced defense and large size, but the damage potential is much improved, so you just have to pick favourable engagements. If you can target a lord on the back lines or other tougher single targets, you should have a great time. Volton combines the best parts of Kurt Helborg and a Lecter to become a very powerful and unbreakable frontlines battler with access to powerful battle prayers. Not really a bad way to use him with outstanding melee stats and magical armor piercing damage. He can hit anything he gets close to extremely hard, so get him right into the front lines against key targets and use those battle prayers whenever possible for added value. His mounts is a Barded Warhorse. We're also getting a new generic lord type, Lord Wizards, and these come with the Lord of Fire, Death, Beasts, Life, Shadows, Heavens, Light or Metal. They are exactly the same as heroes, so just use them exactly the same on the backlines and casting, whilst avoiding melee at all costs. We also have the mounting options of the Barded Warhorse or Imperial Pegasus. However, if you'd like some help reducing the cost of all games you buy, you should check out Instant Gaming. If you're watching this video, chances are you like playing Total War Warhammer, and you know as well as I do that collecting every DLC you want is a pretty expensive task. If you wanted to get a complete experience on Steam, you're looking at nearly £400 if you can't catch a sale. With Instant Gaming, you can get the full experience for half the price and then spend that extra cash on a bunch more games while you're at it. Games like Game of the Year contenders Balatro or Black Myth Wukong, or maybe you're looking to clear some older games from your list like No Man's Sky now it's finally an actual game, or Red Dead Redemption 2. Whatever you're looking for, they have you covered with the best prices you can find anywhere, and all of this is backed up by a 4.7 out of 5 star rating on Trustpilot with over 700,000 reviews and 24/7 customer service there to fix any issue you might run into as soon as possible. I've bought a bunch of games from them over the past few months, and I've never had a problem with any of my keys that I received in moments. Plus, anyone that shops using my link will not only be supporting the channel, they'll also be able to enter the monthly giveaways where you can choose anything store-wide 100% free. So if you want to save money buying games, check out Instant Gaming at the link below. One last thank you to both you and Instant Gaming for supporting the channel, and now back to the roster. Next up we have the heroes, and first up we have Hans Zintler. He's just a slightly improved Empire captain with a little bit more leadership. Other than that, exactly the same, apart from the risky name. For his mounts, he has the Barded Warhorse. We also have Ludwig Schwarzhelm. He's another stronger but fairly standard battling hero. Strong melee stats and decent non-armor piercing damage, so get him on the front lines versus less armored targets for easy value. He will get more damage as he makes more kills in combat, so maybe feed him some chaff early on to stack this as fast as possible before sending him into something better. He also has a Barded Warhorse. We also have Bertha Bestraufrung, pretty much an improved warrior priest with some extra abilities. Same melee stats and only a little bit more damage, so will be about the same in melee combat. And she comes with a Blessed Barded Warhorse. We also have Volton, a weaker version of the Lord of the same name, fairly heavily reduced stats across the board, including losing that unbreakable leadership. Still a decent frontlines battler, but not the most armor piercing, even with the addition of armor sundering attacks. We also have Egil Dirchwald. He's another fairly standard battling hero, decent stats across the board, but lacking armor piercing to make him into a real terror. As is, they'll do well on the front lines, focusing on anything they can to make the most of that bonus damage. Mounting options, we have a Barded Warhorse and Imperial Pegasus. And lastly, we have the new generic heroes, brought down from being a Lords, the Huntmasters. Slight stat reduction across the board from the Lord version, but essentially the same unit. Next up we have melee infantry, and first we have the Steve Dawes. Stevedores? I don't know, it's one of the two. Early game armor piercing unit with some very respectable melee power for something so cheap. The defense is pretty low to match this price tag, so they're somewhat of a glass cannon. I wouldn't use them as an entire front line, instead use them to augment your line holders with some extra damage. No matter if it's melee or ranged, they'll take hits from all directions without much defense, so want to be in a position to absorb as few as possible. Sisters of Faith and Chastity are honestly just female flagellants with 8 more HP. Use them the same as the Unbreakable Chaff Shredder, and they should do just fine. The Sisters of Sigmar, compared to Greatswords, are about on par with slightly reduced weapon strength and charge bonus, but improved defense and speed alongside their 30% resistance. This makes them into much better of a line holder alongside doing that same great armor piercing anti-infantry damage. They are extremely tough to take down with anything but armor piercing and magical damage, so even with their lack of shields, they're extremely tanky. Get them as your full front line for a very strong all-rounder. Imperial Foot are an extremely tanky front lines unit with very high armor, strong defense, and decent non-armor piercing anti-infantry damage. They're absolutely one of the new best line holders in the faction and can keep most enemies in place for a very long time. Of course, they will need help to take out whatever they're fighting, but as long as they get that, they can keep enemies still all battle long. They also come in a couple of variations. Greatsword's Imperial Foot drop 2 defense and a shield to gain 2 attack and a bunch more armor piercing damage. Overall, this makes them into much more of a damage dealer that's a little bit more vulnerable to all forms of damage. They're still decently sturdy with the same defense as Greatswords, but more attack and armor. If you want to push the aggression a little bit more while still being pretty tough to get rid of, these will be the choice for you. And lastly, Halberd's Imperial Foot. They swap a chunk of attack for a huge boost to defense alongside more armor piercing and a new anti-large bonus. They're of course the best melee line holders with such a high defense stat, whilst being relatively devastating with their decent attack and high damage. Against anything large, they will remain in place and put the hurt on anything that comes their way, no problem. Of the 3, these would be my choice as they combine high defense with strong damage, and the only downside is the lack of shields that can be solved by just taking out ranged threats before they get close. And lastly, we have Knights of the North Star. Compared to regular Imperial Foot, they drop a tiny amount of HP but gain a lot more armor piercing damage. Aside from that, they're basically the same, so probably the best frontlines unit in the Empire. Super tanky with decent defense, high armor and a shield, and still strong damage dealers with armor piercing and decently high attack. Can't really complain with the only downside being slower speed. We also have a new cavalry unit, Mounted Knights of the North Star. These drop 1 defense from the foot version but gain a ton of speed, charge bonus and weapon strength. Obviously, they don't want to be in the front lines and are of course a powerful shock cavalry unit, and you want to use them to charge around the backs of enemies and crush them with repeated cycle charging for massive damage and minimal risk. We also have a couple of monsters and beast units. First up, Hunting Hounds. These are just the same as Chaos Warhounds, but have a relentless chase ability. They will work just the same and be great versus backlines ranged targets and anything retreating to make sure they never come back. We also have Imperial Griffin Riders. Pretty similar to Bretonnian Hippogriff Knights, but even smaller in number. They have the same speed but boosted melee and damage stats, making them a lot more powerful in sustained combat. They still have a good chunk of charge bonus, so you can still cycle charge them just fine, giving you lots of options on how you want to use them. And lastly, we have the one and only new war machine, the Iron Colossus of Nuln. It looks pretty similar to a Necrofex Colossus and it works that way too. It has giga boosted stats with tons of armor, unbreakable leadership and extremely high HP. In melee, it's devastating with high attack and armor piercing, flaming, burnt imbued damage with a bonus versus infantry. In short, it chews through front lines like they're nothing and actually looks after itself pretty well with fairly high defense for something so large. At a range, it has a moderate range for artillery and massive damage in all of its 3 missile types. This makes it excellent at taking out a variety of targets, whether they're giant single entities, heavy armored groups of monsters, or swarms of infantry. It's a real jack of all trades and master of all, and should be kept at range as much as possible to make the most of that devastating firepower. We also have a couple of new Regiments of Renown, Sigmar's Purifiers, Maidens of Sigmar, and Reiksguard in a circle. And a new Elect Count troop, the Nordland Seahawks. So to wrap up with a few thoughts about the mod. The units added here are extremely powerful on the whole. Some mods and DLCs for that matter pad out rosters with weak units, but this one is pretty much just hits for every single unit. Some of the lords and heroes are a little bit basic with very standard stats and playstyles, but they're by no means weak just because they're a little bit boring. If you're looking for something to beef up the front lines of the Empire and find greatswords to be too squishy, you won't be disappointed with the range of options on display. Even if you don't have all the stats under control, there is something here for everyone, so you'll always have something new to play with and gain more options with each successful confederation. They can also change how you want to prioritize uniting the Empire, as you now may want to consider going after factions specifically for their exclusive units, depending on what stage of the game you're at. Sure, the Iron Colossus of Nuln is good, but in the early game, you might only be able to make use of the Stevedores, so prioritize going after them first. All of the models also look great and nothing here looks out of place on the Empire lines, with the exception of the giant mech, but I'm not going to complain about that. As for balance, this might be on the stronger side. Like I said, all of these units are very good, so if you make use of them all, you may find battles being a little bit easier than usual. However, getting to that point in the campaign will take a very long time, so I don't have a problem with this, as it being a nice reward for regaining control of all the states. Combine this with the campaign changes and variety of basic units from all the different state variations, and this mod is offering a lot even in its beta state. The mod maker, David I'm sorry, man, I can't pronounce your name. I'm real sorry. Also commented on the campaign video, so if you want more details, be sure to check out the mod page, Discord, and everything listed there. And that is all I have on the roster of the Sigmar's Heirs Empire Overhaul mod. Let me know your thoughts on the mod in the comments below. If there's any mods you'd like me to take a look at, then let me know under my mod suggestion post on the channel's community page that I will have linked down below. Like, subscribe, be sure to check out Instant Gaming, and if you want more mod videos, then check out this one all about the campaign side of this overhaul.